Hello, Mandibil here. Welcome to my deconstruction of Stefan Molyneux's book, The Art of the Argument, Part 8. And this time we are heading into the chapter called The Argument as Civilization. And I had a look at the contents of the book, and it seems that it's a more lighthearted approach, the common chapters here, and then we get into something a bit more directly philosophical at a later point. So I might end up jumping a bit through this, maybe cherry picking interesting parts. But I do like really to not cherry pick and take things out of context. This is our old problem in philosophy, that you take some argument somewhere that potentially can stand alone, or maybe can't, but you take it out as if it can stand alone, and then it's dependent on some context in which it has been mentioned, right? Another way to misuse that is the reverse, where you say that, like Stefan Molyneux did in the debate with the rationality rules, that he presented a syllogism, a deductive syllogism, as the core argument for the proof of his UPB ethics, and then claim that we can't discuss this deduction because it's dependent on the rest of the book. Well, a deductive syllogism is not depending on anything but that which is contained within the syllogism. So there's a lot of, just be aware of the fact, or it's not a fact, but in my experience, most philosophy have a tendency to be manipulative, right? It's wordy rather than making sure that you feel that you are carried along in a fashion where you are left to say, if you agree with this, we can carry on, right? If you agree with this, we can carry on. If we don't agree, fine, you don't have to carry on with me, right? You don't have to carry on with my arguments. That's why I'm a huge proponent of arguing philosophically from axioms, which means that something like, it's possibly a first principle approach, right? That you start from the basics all the way down to the deepest levels of metaphysics. And then you say, okay, I will settle this as being obvious, or a step I need to settle that this is the case, and I will carry on further as if this is the case. The coming philosophy in my description here depends on this axiom being the case, so to say, right? But it's also a junction where the reader can say, well, I don't agree with that axiom, right? I don't agree with that axiom, so I can't follow you further in your philosophy, right? That's a great way of doing it, right? It, of course, it can be manipulated, right? You could possibly manipulate people into following you, even though it's a badly argued axiom, or it's an invalid axiom, or however formative axiom should take on, and so on, right? But at least it's an indication that this is a junction, this is a fork in the road, right? If you agree with me on this axiom, we can head on into my further philosophy together until we reach the next junction where we have to take a stance, right? And on the way, you don't have to accept any of that philosophy that might lead to that next axiom. You have to have your ears and eyes open for bad arguments and so on, right? And this is exactly the approach I take in my book on ethics, right? So I basically start from the deepest level of metaphysics, going all the way to defining a moral principle, and maybe even write a few chapters on, applied ethics, so to say, right? How do you apply? What would my understanding be of how to use this principle, right? And that sort of comes with a caveat that this is completely my personal interpretation of the principle, right? And that also would indicate that you're trying to be neutral. You are not agenda-driven, right? You're not looking in the far ahead in the future and saying, I have to go over there to, or that's the moral thing or whatever it is. I have to prove, so I have to connect the dots so I get over there. No, the great philosopher will encompass everything, and only in the last minute of ethics derive a moral principle, right? There might be necessary at some point before that, or before you head into ethics, to actually identify what you mean by morality or moral principle, or what's it all about, right? You can't go look in reality and find moral principles or morality or anything like that. I'm certainly convinced about anything else would sound ridiculous, right? Somebody would have found it yet, right? They can find, planets around suns or stars in far-flung galaxies or whatever, right? Solar systems or planetary systems, but they can't find morality here on Earth, right? So it might be the case that it's not something you find or look for, or it's not deductive, right? It's not cognitive was the word I'm looking for, right? Okay, so just bear in mind that philosophy is not about somebody standing on a cliff throwing words at you to convince you, right? I don't like this convincing thing. I would actually encourage anybody listening to me to not feel that they need to be convinced. I would like them to do the exact opposite, because I don't want to be convinced by my own words, right? I don't want to, if I found some philosophical conclusions, or what way you want to put it, right? I don't want to be attached to it like it's my child or something like that, and I have to defend it with, right? That's often just look at how most people argue philosophically. It's always some kind of agenda that they are driven towards this, and you might even don't understand why. You might have an idea why they argue that way, but it's always something about their personal life that they want to make sure that the conclusion ends in the right place. So, as a blue stamping of the way they live, or the way they were taught to think, or something like that. It's so unbelievably common, right? Even among philosophers, and Stefan Molyneux, in my opinion, is a good example of that, right? It has to fit with religion. It has to fit with politics. It has to fit with his philosophy, right? It has to fit. You're just being told how to approach it. You're not being carried through the philosophical rigidity. And that's a problem. That's a huge problem. And the reason why I can't take it seriously, even if there's some part of it that is great, and I might be able to say, well, there's an argument here. I haven't seen that before. That's a great argument, or that's a great piece of philosophy. It actually highlights a bit that I was in doubt about, right? And on the contrary, actually, right? On the contrary, in the last couple of parts of this deconstruction, I delved a bit into logic and deduction and induction and so on, right? Because it has been on my to-do list for a while, because I need to get to it, right? And in my book writing, this has become a this is about the time where I need to do this. So it sort of came at the right time. So I sat down during this weekend and did a lot of thinking about deduction, logic, and induction, and so on. And I reached some depths that I haven't reached before. I was pretty certain I would get down there, right? But this writing here didn't help me doing the philosophy. Instead, this badly argued, superficially argued philosophy actually provoked me to do it the right way, if you understand my drift, right? So it's sort of, let's say, bad philosophy can actually improve your philosophy because you see this is so badly argued. I'm going to doing it a different way that is actually a better way, right? But it's still a personal judgment whether or not your philosophy is good, because it's a kind of thinking. It's your thinking. Stefan Molyneux makes a living out of sort of exposing his thoughts, right? And you in one understanding, it's actually a good thing that he has very clearly sophistic traits while thinking he's a great philosopher, because then he presents his philosophy as close to as he sees it, I would think, right? And then you get a very decent insight into his philosophy, and then he exposes how bad he is at philosophy, right? So you have a clearer view about, am I going to listen to this guy or not, right? So it's just my 2 cents, right? This is sort of the kind of thinking I'm doing, right? Which is also a kind of philosophy, you could say. Okay, let's see what he has to say about the argument and civilization. Excuse me, my nose is running, so I have to do something about it. Excuse me. So I'm back. Sorry about that. So sort of ad hoc things you have to do while podcasting. Let me see what we can do with the argument and civilization. Okay. In the hurly-burly of human interactions, we will always have disagreements. So he's speaking about the future, and he knows always. And so I would be very careful about predicting the future, right? I mean, talking about we always we will have disagreements, and in the hurly-burly of right, which is nothing to be upset about. Why not? If I'm having a disagreement with my wife, I would be kind of upset, right? If it's an important disagreement, it might end up that she's destroying the family and taking half of my shit using the state, right? I don't know. Why? How dare you use these sort of grand sweeping terms, throw them in the face of people in this almost like stupid parental sophistry or fake philosophy, right? It sounds like, and parents says, and there was always to be different. We can never agree about anything, right? Okay. Well, a disagreement doesn't necessarily mean you can't agree, but you know what I mean, right? Okay. The fundamental question is, how will we resolve these disagreements? Historically, 2 answers have been implemented: fundamentalist religiosity and government power. The third alternative, the far more civilized, is the argument. The argument. I don't know why he has to do that. The argument, right? It's sort of the one ring, the ring to rule them all, the argument to rule all other arguments, right? It sounds like religious bullshit, right? The recent debate, the honest willingness to submit to the higher standards of reason and evidence. The higher standards of reason and evidence. But people in religion and government, they reason, right? They are actually very rational, right? If you can say some magic words and people believe them and throw money at you and pretend that they don't have a gun to their face, I mean, it sounds rational to me. It doesn't necessarily sound moral to me, right? That's a different question. Rationality does not have built-in morality. Rationality is reasoning about that which you find valuable, right? You can reason about a gazillion different things. How to jump in a trampoline on Tasmania, right? But I'm not going to do that because that's not valuable to me to reason about, right? So, okay. In the absence of this mutual surrender to a higher standard, we end up surrendering to lower standards. Superstition, government force, bullying, intimidation, sophistry, you name it. Sophistry, you name it. I'm going to name it. It's sophistry. This is sophistry, right? This is a sophist book. Huh? And that's another trick that I figured out, or I have sort of an idea that this is how people work, that if somebody makes a moral statement of some kind, those who are listening to the guy or girl presenting that moral argument implicitly believes that that person is following that argument or follow that statement or principle, right? If he says sophistry is bad, instinctively the reader will think that he is not a sophist, right? Well, that's a sophist trick, right? You see, it's very calculated, right? It's manipulation on a higher level. Okay. In human society, it is literally called the argument or else. Is he saying do as you're told or else you will be punished or something? Okay, I don't know. We all possess an animalistic side that seeks power over others, over resources. So others are resources. Are you combining other people as resources, or are you saying that everybody thinks of other people as resources? It's just, is this a kind of a Freudian slip? That you're sort of a narcissist psychopath who believe that other people are basically resources? I would never put my words in this way, because this would be the same as me comparing other individuals to resources, like, a jar of jam or something like that, right? Or gasoline for my car. Oh, that's a resource. That's a person over there. That's a resource, right? A human resource. I hate that term, human resource, right? Curbing this side is the essential task of a civilization, and the only tools it has at its disposal are philosophy, reason, evidence, and empiricism, the anti-madness magic of clear and critical thinking. We either surrender to facts, or we must be forced to surrender to each other. Oh, he gets this like this. I need to be sophist, rail against. And he's just throwing words around. That sounds great, right? Philosophy, reason, evidence, empiricism, right? Magic of clear thinking and critical thinking, right? Okay. We are either dominated by reality or by force and lies. As the old song says, you have to serve somebody. Well, I disagree about this bullshit, right? It's kind of based on fallacious metaphysics. You are not dominated by anything. Nothing is dominating you. It's this religious bullshit. God is dominating you with his nature or something like that. Bullshit. You have an experience, right? And interpreting that experience as a kind of domination makes me sick. You're not dominated by your experience, right? That experience you call reality. And taking that a bit further, that reality you're talking about, those individuals, whoever they may be, who call themselves the religion or the state or whatever, they are also a part of that reality, right? So you're sort of making a false dichotomy. These entities are not outside reality. So you need to be dominated apparently by reality. And these things you're saying, they shouldn't dominate you, but they're still a part of reality. So what the hell are you saying, right? This clear thinking and critical thinking and anti-madness. Well, what you're saying is pretty much unclear and madness, right? It's just like you're throwing words left and right. You haven't even done a piece of thinking about them, trying to check whether or not they actually make any sense. Ostracism. But how do we deal with the anti-rational? Nobody is anti-rational. Nobody is anti-rational. Everybody is rational. They just have a different rationality than you have, right? It's because there's no more principle that you can follow, in my opinion, that you have to label somebody else as having wrong think or being anti this kind of thinking and having a problem in their head that needs to be something, right? I know we are talking about ostracism, which is it's a step in the right direction, I would say, right? But labeling people as anti-rational, I don't believe that anybody in the world is anti-rational from their subjective point of view. And if you think that you can upgrade your subjective thinking to an objective, rational kind of thinking that you can impose on everybody else, well, who are you other than these people who want to go around telling people how to think? So it's like, oh man, everybody, I might need a little minute to talk about this, right? Rationality is thinking about value creation, you could say, right? It's the kind of thinking you do to figure out whether or not some kind of action, or maybe a lack of action, or some kind of behavior doing something in the world, right? I'm not crazy about the term behavior. I'm making sure that I tend to refer to actions because those are the things in the real world, right? Nobody is saying, well, this is a great idea. This is valuable to me, but I'm not going to do it. I'm taking something further down the list that is less valuable to me, and I'm going to do that instead. Who the hell would do that, right? We are not built that way, right? Unless there's some kind of intervention or threat of force or, I'm going to fucking lock you in the basement or something if you're going to do this. Well, then the free thought of rationality, right, has been skewed into a forced rationality where you're saying, okay, this is a concentration camp, but if I try to escape, I'm going to be killed. So by not escaping, I have a chance to live. That's rationality. And even if you enforce something on people, they're still rational, even if the consequence balance has just been changed. So what was previously rational is no longer that rational, right? What morality does is a self-regulating principle of your actions, where you might see that the best rational action, the most rational action for you to do is actually following this principle. You have to somehow appeal to people's rationality, not their reasoning skills, their rationality, their sense of value creation, to make a moral principle work, right? And I would agree that ostracism, I don't like the term ostracism. It's like people banding together and say, you're going to have to go out of the city, just like in old Athens, right? Which is sort of a kind of democracy, right? I don't like the ostracism, but I mean, it's a step in the right direction. It has the connotation of something that I would call philosophical, but still, it's politics, right? Okay. It is all well and good to say we should submit to reason and evidence. I'm not going to submit to anything. What is this being dominated at submitting yourself, right? Surrender to facts. It's fucking bullshit, right? I'm going to mark this as my bullshit surrender to facts, forced to surrender to, there's a dominated by reality over here, right? And then submit to reason and evidence. This language is not philosophical, right? I'm not submitting to reason and evidence. And, evidence and reason is purely mental, right? So it's completely subjective what kind of reasoning you do. Some people, philosophers, politicians, might be able to have an influence on how you reason and what you reason about. That's for sure, right? But it's still subjective how you reason. Evidence is a part of reality in the sense that the object that evidence refers to is not necessarily objective, but it's an object. It's a subjectively experienced object of some kind, an elephant. But if it's evidence, it's not the exact elephant you want, but that which is an evidence of maybe a sort of safari club or something like. So, okay, the elephant is an evidence that I'm on the right way to that safari club, right? So evidence is not what you may want to have evidence that, okay, I'm finding the road sign that leads me to the place I'm going to. So the road sign is evidence of the place I'm going to. But I'm not really interested in the road sign as such, right? So be careful when he uses reason and evidence rather than empiric and differentiated from the object you're interested in or objects that will lead you to what you're interested in. Evidence is not what you're looking for as such because it's evidence. It's something that points in the direction, right? Okay. Philosophical standards must be defended through Ostracism. Okay. Who says? How did you arrive at that? This is sort of an argument, This is an argument, but it's the result of it's a conclusion of some kind of philosophical argumentation. So where does that come from? Why don't you lead us through the thinking? Philosophical standard must be defended through Ostracism. Why? Hvorfor? And that was Danish. How did you reach the? Don't just throw conclusions in my face, right? You need to, if you want to pretend to be a philosopher, you need to walk me through the argument or the premises for arriving at this conclusion. This is only the last part of the argument. This is not an argument. It's only the conclusion. An argument, as you say, is inductive and deductive and so on. And now you're just throwing conclusions into my face. How dare you, man, in a book about arguing? Oh, right? You see how fucking ridiculous this is? Intellectual ostracism, or refusing to engage with people who cannot rise to minimum standards of rationality, is an essential and often I think he's using the term rationality in the sense of reasoning. Even if he talks about reason and evidence, when he says rationality, he also means some kind of reason. I don't know. He's not talking of rationality in the way I define it, right? And I may have my own kind of weird way of defining rationality. I just have a notion that rationality is what is rational, is what is smart to do, not necessarily right to do. That would be some kind of morally adjusted, right? But rationality is, well, if I, get some money, I can buy some food, right? That's rational. That's rational, right? So, in a singing contest, bad singers are excluded from contest. Well, what's a bad singer? Yeah, now it's a circular argument. You're just saying those you say bad singers are excluded. But then somebody is excluding someone and label them as bad singers. And therefore you say bad singers are excluded. So it's sort of a circular argument. There could be good singers that are excluded, right? I mean, this kind of argument is so fucking annoying, right? It's actually talking down to me as a reader, right? I'm being treated as if I'm a stupid fucking little idiot who needs, be coddled into submission, right? It's offensive, this kind of philosophy. They are ostracized. Tennis championships work the same way. If you want a job but don't get it, you are ostracized from your potential place of employment. If you ask a woman out on a date and she says no, but you show up anyway, you are stalking her, i.e. not granting her the right to ostracize you. If you don't like going on a particular restaurant, you are ostracizing it. See how it works? I do. I just don't like the ostracization, right? It has connotation of politics, right? Way back in Athens, and you can look up the term ostracization, or I'm not sure if that was the word. It's a amplification of a Greek word, ostrakia, something like that, right? See how this works? By reading this, you are ostracizing all other books. No, I'm not ostracizing them, right? I'm not trying to get rid of other books. I'm just not able to read all the books I want to read at the same time. Be careful with how you interpret this ostracization, right? Ostracism is everywhere. It is far more prevalent than acceptance and engagement. However, ostracism can provoke conflict. Rejecting people for not being up to scratch can make them quite upset, to say the least. The decay of assertiveness in our intellectual classes is the fundamental undoing of our civilization. The decay, these sweeping statements, right? The decay of assertiveness. But how do you act assertive if you're trying to avoid someone? It's in a kind of, I'm an assertive avoider. If you're ghosting someone, right? I'm doing it assertively. I don't know. I mean, in our intellectual classes, is the fundamental of undoing of our civilization. It's just like, okay. I mean, okay. I can't use these broad sweeping terms to anything, right? I can't use it for anything because you can't compress so much philosophy into one sentence. You should avoid doing something like this, right? It's sophistry. People who cannot argue but keep trying are like people who cannot sing but keep trying. Well, who says they should stop singing, right? If you can't sing, fuck them. Just sing all you want, man. No matter how much other people tell you that you shouldn't sing or whatever it is. I mean, what the... Given that we are all in a choir, so to speak, off-key singers destroy our collective. Oh, we are into collectivism now, right? Oh, collective harmony by being allowed to stay and wail. Oh, so if you can't sing the way we sing, you should be left out. You can't be in the club. It's a big club and you ain't in it, right? Our collective harmony, yes. I would actually get out of that collective as fast as my legs could carry me, right? Okay. Encouraging the incompetent to wage war in the realm of the argument compromises the battle entirely. Oh, compromises the battle! The battle against irrationality! People not singing the right way, they're destroying the collective harmony. We have to get rid of them, right?
We have to put them in concentration camps. Yes, yes. And if they don't behave, we can shoot them. We can shoot them because they are irrational. They don't function well. There's something wrong with them. We might just get rid of them, right? Ooh.
Fuck off, you bastard, right? You are not saying it directly, but there is an undercurrent of something nasty, something dark, right? It's just below the surface. I sense it very strongly, right? I don't like this at all, right? Encouraging the incompetent to wage war in the realm of the argument compromises the battle entirely. I mean, you could, if for all I know, this could be a sentence pulled out of, Mein Kampf, right? With a few adjustments of words and the argument and so on, right? It sounds completely ridiculous, crazy talk to me, right? I mean, I'm kind of flabbergasted that he's actually writing shit like this, right? I knew he was. My opinion about my personal opinion about Stefan Molyneux has sort of changed for the worse during the last few years, right? But I wasn't aware that he has been writing shit like this, right? I mean, I would much prefer reading UPB, even if it's bullshit philosophy. At least it's an attempt at philosophy. This, I'm not even sure what the word is, what the term is. Is it rebel-rousing, mobilizing rhetoric? What is it? Encouraging the incompetent to wage war in the realm of the argument compromises the battle entirely. This is a man of the mission, right? This is a completely crazy talking nut job, right? I mean, encouraging the incompetent, all the stupid people to wage war in the realm of the argument compromises the battle entirely. Read it. Just what the hell is this, right? Read it. Think about what it's saying. Right? It's like, I can't help this comparison. I have to do this because I'm a rigid, thoughtful, engaged philosopher who wants to point out when something sounds really bad, right? There's no difference between this and a stupid idiot like Adolf Hitler standing, yelling, spouting weird stuff into the air and hoping it sticks on a flabbergasted population, right? We are waging this war in the realm of, and those people are going to compromise the battle entirely if we have to get rid of them. It's just, it's so close without going the last mile, right? Okay. And my hairs are just, like standing up like this, right? The ancient enemy of philosophy, sophistry, or cunning rather than reasoning, is also the modern enemy of civilization. Those skilled in the dark arts of making the worst argument appear better are the counterfeiters of the true currency of reason. And just as counterfeit money tends to drive real money out of circulation, bad arguments drive out good arguments. I don't buy into these kind of metaphors or analogies, right? You can't compare economic observations with argument observations. I don't buy it, right? And we end up with political correctness and reactive hysteria rather than reasoned arguments from first principles. Well, would you fucking try to establish arguments about arguments, meta-arguments, by using first principles? Would you, please, right? Start by metaphysics and then work all the way up through, epistemology, knowledge, truth, objectivity, and so on, right? And you're even bringing in value, you call moral statements, value statements, and going all the way through ethics also, as if this all been settled and everybody knows what the hell you're talking about, right? There are no recent arguments for your book on arguments. Or there are no first principles listed anywhere, right? And then you'll say, oh, but it's somewhere else in the book. I've written the book and it must be somewhere in my book. Well, I'm not going to, I'm trying to deconstruct your freaking book here, right? And I haven't seen any first principles. They might be there, but I'm unable to find them. So what the hell are you talking about, right? There is an old saying, misattributed to Socrates, but nonetheless still very powerful. When the debate is lost, slander becomes the tool of the loser. Oh yeah, okay. So if you're debating with someone and they feel that their shitty argument won't hold up, they're starting to go into ad hominem, or trying to red herring, or what's it called? Not a scarecrow argument, but straw manning. A good singer cannot harmonize well with a bad singer. No, but a bad singer can harmonize with a bad singer. Harmonize? Well, who's going to tell? I mean, it's these supposedly objective standards that can only be subjective, right? You can bring all the gadgets you want, measure sticks and oscillators or microscopes, whatever. It's still a subjective experience, right? Pairing a poor singer with a good one. Well, what's a poor singer? What's a good singer? All this bullshit arguing, it's so fucking bad, right? Oh man, he's really, really, really talking down to his reader. It's as if, well, my little gang of listeners, they don't understand rigid philosophy. So I have to give them this rhetorical sophistry instead, right? So they engage with me. They found, yes, finally somebody. Oh. Intellectual slander is the rage of those who wish to have the power to influence social discourse, but who lack the intellect, the training, the will, or the maturity to productively engage in such debates. Many people at a rock concert would love to be the singer or the guitarist, but they may lack the voice, the physical dexterity, or the sheer willpower to keep practicing until their fingers bleed or they go hoarse. The ancient fable of the fox and the sour grapes holds true there. The fox, who cannot reach the grapes, storms off, telling himself that they were probably sour anyway and would taste terrible. Yeah, well, that's the stories people create, right? The parable tells about how human beings function, right? So I recognize this bit in myself when I lost some money on an example. I lost some money on something. It was stupid to spend money on that because I would only go into something. I wouldn't get the value, my rationality had told me, right? Then I think, okay, if I just pretend that money was somehow already gone because I would have used it on something else, and it doesn't feel so bad not to get the result that you didn't get from your rationality. And this is the problem of not being, it's hard to, encompass your own lack of skills. What would you say, right? Something like that. It's just about being honest to yourself in a way. They say, okay, I'm not good enough. But compared to the rationality I had, the reasoning I had done about what I found valuable, right? So, but it's a good one. I like that, the fox and the sour grapes, right? Just like I like the Emperor's New Clothes. I love that one, right? What he cannot achieve, he attacks in order to minimize feelings of failure. He cannot satisfy his hunger through food, so he satisfies his rage through slander. Oh, it could also be a she, right? The bad singer who smashes his microphone or who physically attacks other singers has clearly lost the competition. However, if people are not trained in the discipline of rational argumentation, they cannot tell the difference between reasoning and manipulation. Oh, Says this guy, right? It's unbelievable, right? But he's actually a proponent of what he's talking about. He's one of those guys he's talking about. He just think he's on another level than all these little people, right? He isn't. Between truth and lies, between the clear evidence and pretty stories, those who wish to be paid for bad art, but this annoys me that he hasn't any grip of what objectivity and subjectivity means, right? He has no understanding. He thinks that there's a objective standard for what is good art and what is bad art, right? If Rod Stewart was entering, X Factor in 2019 or whatever, right? He probably wouldn't go that far because he doesn't sing very well or something like that, right? And you can find other singers who actually technically, from a technical reference, doesn't sound that great. And then there are singers who are absolutely fantastic technically, but there's no nerve in their singing. They don't get you. They don't get to your it doesn't make that art bell ring in you, right? They don't feel attracted to your way of singing. So what is good art? What is bad art? But it's purely subjective. It depends on my experience. Don't go around telling me that there's such thing as bad art. Yes, I might find some art bad, but that might not be the same as somebody else thinking that is bad, right? But somebody that hates Picasso. I love Picasso, right? I mean, it's who are you to tell anybody what is good and what is bad, right? You're just referring to it. Some art must be bad in somebody's eyes, so everybody reading this can refer to some kind of art that they consider bad. But it's not the same bad art as somebody else reading the book referring to their bad art, right? Okay. First, blind the sensibilities of their audience. Okay, the argument on charity. Let us suppose you get sick. If you are an adult and of reasonable mental competence, you surely knew this was an inherent risk of being alive. The meaty machinery of mere existence is very messy and prone to failure. Surely, at least in a free market environment, you have bought insurance so that your medical bills are covered. Alternatively, you could have saved your money so that you can pay your bills directly. One other option is to ask for charity. There's something roaming in my mind after reading the previous chapter, right? I'm going to make a little mark here too. It was about here, came. It's this ostracism. I would just like to, you could probably write a whole book about this ostracism, how to do that. Because you can ostracize everybody in the whole world, but you can. It's not like it's impossible. But then you're sort of living on some deserted island or something like that, right? And you probably won't survive very long. I watched the Tom Hanks movie Castaway to get an idea of what I'm talking about. You have to somehow, to have any decent kind of life, you have to work with somebody else. To some extent, at least, right? If you want to give these, have a sense of what we're doing here. There's a guy on the YouTube called Mossy Bottom, who is a guy who went from working in Britain, in London or something like that, and he sold everything his own, took his money and went to Ireland, bought a very old house somewhere out in nowhere, and set up his own life there, right? And he wants to be as independent, you could say, as possible, self-sufficient. I think he used that term, right? It's kind of interesting. I'm not particularly interested whether or not he uses this kind of tool or makes his if he has ducks or he has rabbits or pigs or whatever he has in his little farm there, right? Or carrots or whatever it is. I'm not really interested in the in the actual sort of everyday workings he does. It's sort of interesting. It's not that, but I'm more interested is the philosophical aspects of this, right? Trying to see how far can he go on his own before he has to have some contact to somebody else. He can't go out in the woods finding a webcam, for instance, to make this video he makes, right? So somebody has to create this webcam or whatever it is he uses, so he can make that video. Maybe he could say, okay, then I don't need to make the video. Okay, but right? How bare bone can it get before you are saying, I have to have some, and even to mostly raise your living standards above just pure survival, right? Just completely bare bone survival. I don't think that's good for human beings, right? I mean, it's not, I might be wrong about it, but just having to get from meal to meal to meal to meal, I'm not sure it's necessarily bad for you as such, right? But your life lacks a bit of, it's just an extended period between birth and death, a number of meals, and then you go from birth to death, right? It just feels empty in a way, right? I'm not saying it can't be interesting and fulfilling to make your next meal, right? But it's like, I don't know. It's a challenging thought. It's quite thought-provoking to me, this kind of, I like to find these little channels here and there that has not directly as a philosophy that says, hey, you should do this and you shouldn't do that. That's irrational. That is, I'm the greatest philosopher of all time. Not necessarily, but where it has some kind of philosophical content in the way in the indirectly, you could say, in the basic content. And that the Mossy Bottom is a kind of along those lines. So it makes me think about what it means to be a human being and what it means to be be yourself, self-sufficient or dependent, and so on, right? So it's interesting, right? So, okay. All human desires are infinite, but all resources are finite. We all want to help others, but we do not want to be taken advantage of or to subsidize and thereby encourage bad decisions. It is merely a question of universality. Irresponsible people can only be subsidized by the responsible. Spenders can only be rescued by savers. If everyone is irresponsible, everyone loses. Thus, responsibility must be a value. But if responsibility is a value, subsidizing and thus rewarding irresponsible cannot also be a value. Well, I would highlight this as a solid, fairly decent. I'm not this kind of universality, but I see what it's getting at, right? You can't say that this guy, it's okay that they spend all other people's money, but these people have to work and produce something that those people over there, why are those people different than these people and so on, right? Well, what's the argument for that? And there is no real argument, right? Other than, I want that. So this is a decent kind of, there's some argument in there, right? He's actually trying to argue now, right? Irresponsible people can only be subsidized by responsible. Why? Okay, so if you go to Mossy Bottom, you see a very, very, very responsible person who makes sure that he doesn't do anything that destroys his crops or anything like that. He takes care of it. He makes sure that he doesn't spend too much and too little, and constantly weighs out the costs and benefits, right? That's a responsible person. But if somebody is, destroying their family and becoming dependent on a welfare state and need to put their kids into a concentration camp called daycare or schools or something like that, well, then they are irresponsible. They are not actually taking responsibility for their own life. They want to engage everybody else and force their irresponsibility upon others who have to have forced responsibility to take care of these irresponsible people, right? I agree with that. And if everyone was allowed to be that irresponsible, everyone would lose. In the end, you could say, right? Thus, responsibility must be a value. You could put it that way. It's not the best argument, okay, but I think I'm getting at, right? But if responsibility is a value, subsidizing and thus rewarding irresponsible cannot also be a value, right? The opposite can't be a value, right? If so, I'm on board with this. This is decent philosophy, right? This is a good argument as such, right? Is this a decent argument? You could argue with somebody who sort of living off the dole, or single mom or something like that, right? And then you could lure them into the corner where they would say, well, you're just out to get me. Yeah, you just hate all women. Me too. So this is decent argument. It's like, okay, if you say this is okay, what about those over there? Why do they have to do the opposite? If you're saying it's good that these people do it, why can't those people do it, right? What's different about those people, right? Great argument, great argumentation. It's sort of a logic step, right? So if this is kind of universality, okay, I'm warming up to this universality, right? It's like if you say this person has to do this because whatever, right? Because no reason really, right? And then you say, okay, but what about that person over there? Why are they kept out of this or forced to do something that those other people aren't forced to do, right? So what's the difference? We are all people. We are all, we are even from the start, right? Okay. And if we're not even, what's the argument? Well, you always get some kind of bullshit argument, right? That's not really an argument. So fine. I would love if the book was more argued like this, right? Instead of this, railing rhetoric that is fucking pure sophistry, right? So, okay. People who have been raised badly can be forgiven one or two irresponsible decisions. No, they can't. I'm not going to forgive anyone. Forgiveness is religion, right? I don't care about forgiveness. Just as someone learning a new language may occasionally say something inadvertently rude. However, continuing to subsidize people who continually make bad decisions is a very bad idea. Unless you can also get something out of it, right? You have to understand how the welfare state works, right? The welfare state works in a way that those who have power are taking control of the weakest people in society. And then they're saying, we're the only one. You are not allowed to take care of this, only us. Then people say, okay, then it's a combination of people saying, no, let me put it this way. People want to get something for nothing, right? The state is where you go to get something for nothing. You are not going to get it on the free market, right? You're not going down to a local hardware store and say, well, I'm a single mother. I need some stuff, right? They're going to say, well, you have to pay, right? But when you go to the state, you go to say, I'm a single mother. Oh, yes, you're getting money for being a single mother. But the money they have, it's not their money, right? But creating that transfer to some sort of, to a group of people that you can possibly argue must have those resources. And if they weren't transferred by force, they wouldn't get that resource. That works two ways, right? It works as an argument for why you should be stolen from. Otherwise, you're against helping poor people and so on, right? The other thing is those who benefit from the transfer are all those who are getting transferred somewhere else or is a part of doing that transfer, and they leech out some money from this transfer in order to take care of this transfer, right? But other people who might get something over here, right? They need their pension or whatever they need at some point, right? They're saying, oh, the poor people, we need to help the poor people. Oh, the old people and the young and, the sick. Oh, they need so much help. And then a few years later, they get their little, pension over here. And, nobody's looking, right? So by arguing for this transfer to keep going, this transfer over here that you need at some point will also stay in place. Because if these transfers over here disappear, your little transfer over here might also disappear. So you won't get what you want. But you can stand over here and say, oh, the poor and the sick and the old, oh, we need to help them, oh. And then you can go over here, get your little transfer, right? While nobody's looking, but they are so focused on, oh, these moral people who are out to help the old and the sick and the young, and sophistry, right? Manipulation. It's bullshit. Those desiring, how far did I get? However, continuing to subsidize people who continually make bad decisions is a very bad idea. It wastes precious and scarce social resources and ends up punishing those making good decisions while rewarding those making bad decisions, which is the exact opposite of how societies as well as individuals progress. Those desiring charity must submit themselves to the discipline of those providing the charity, since requiring charity is very often a confession that you have made very bad decisions. Obviously, those who might give you charity want to be fairly sure that you are not going to continue to make those very bad decisions. I would agree. This is both because they care about you and also because few people will donate to a charity that does little more than subsidize and encourage irresponsibility. People donate to a charity because it is successful, i.e., it reduces the problems it is trying to address. This is not at all the motive of those who run the welfare state. Quite the opposite, I would agree. Pre-welfare state charities provided enough to live on, but would also involve themselves in your life, and they worked very hard to help you make better decisions. If you continually scorned them and rejected their good advice, they would pull their resources back until you learn better. We give to charity to make people better, not worse. I'm not sure about this making people better, right? I'm interested in their decisions not influencing me in a way that I don't like, right? But I'm not out to, make people better. This is sort of a, what's it called? Well, it's going a bit too far, right? It's jumping into, okay, I'm not sure I like your decision there, right? To, I'm going to make you a better person. That's a completely different ball game. Just make sure that you don't, he's deliciously good, not delicious, what's it called? He is cleverly good at using words to lure you into his thinking, right? So now it's about making people better. So now I have to tell them what to do, right? It's this sort of you're being lured into. Then there comes a great argument. So that sounds right. I just you should told them. Then I could agree with that. Now I'm in agreeable mood with Stefan Molyneux, and then he sort of lured in. Okay, we have to make people better. Well, well, it's like you get, it's sort of slide under the door or something like that, right? This form of benevolent control can be a great sting to the ego of the incompetent, but that is necessary and helpful for everyone involved. Charity is the part of the argument because it remains a voluntary negotiation. Both parties can walk away without resorting to violence. If you want charity, it may come with conditions. That is part of the negotiation. If you find the charitable conditions not to your liking, you can either forego the charity or get charity from someone else whose conditions are more to your liking. Well, fine. Okay. At least I can't see any big troubles there, right? Charity and the division of kindness. Maybe we should stop here. I will say we'll take charity and the division of kindness next time. It's a fairly long. So let's say that this is where we go next time. I'll put a marker here. Yes. See you in the next chapter.